able to. So she had a specific style that was unique to her, and a lot of people try to emulate that, and I played a similar style. This is a place called the Franklin Theater, and I was had occasion to play there in July with a man named John McEwen of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. How many of y'all know the song "Fishing in the Dark"? Yeah, okay, it was that Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. Here's John, and he was celebrating 50 years of the album "Will the Circle Be Unbroken," and I'll tell you a little more about that later, and it'll kind of be an offshoot of what I'm talking about as far as country music goes. All right, so in this presentation, I'm going to deal with two topics. One is, where did country music originate, and how did country music become popular? If you were to think of a city in the U.S. that is a music city, one that represents country music, what city would that be?
Na, 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 na.
A music city that's all about country music.
I'm waiting.
Come on, guys, that's where she's from.
Yes, good guess. Usually whatever's on the tip of your tongue or tip of your brain is probably the right answer. I'm from Nashville, and that is actually where country music is located now. But later I'll tell you another story about it. So you're right, but it's not the birthplace. Okay. All right, we're going to start back with the American Civil War to give things a little bit of context for where country music came from. The South, of course, lost the Civil War. It took... Is that new news to you?
Yeah.
Well, between 1861 and 1865, the war was raging, and it was called the War Between the States, and it was brother fighting literally against brother. So you'd have like a small town, and there would be a divide where some of them would be on one side, the Union, and the other side would be Confederate. We were in one of those towns recently in Maryland. And so what happened as a result is the South became very closed off, but that meant that a lot of their culture kind of just percolated and just became more itself. Country music came about, the certain kinds of dancing, and things that people associate with the South, all of the things you think of, oh, that's a country person. That's what developed during those times. The people started to have that kind of antebellum accent that eventually became twangier and twangier. And that's because of this region here called Appalachia. There is a mountain range that runs from Canada, Newfoundland and Canada, all the way down to central Alabama and the eastern portion of Mississippi. And I actually live in the Appalachian Mountains in the foothills of a mountain called Signal Mountain in Chattanooga. It's Indian territory. It's got a lot of culture, a lot of music there, but it's not primarily country music. Let's see. All right, events that led to the popularization of country music. I'm sure that in your classes on history, you've learned about the Industrial Revolution. And it's a big word that signified nothing when I was your age, probably. I didn't know what the Industrial Revolution was, and I didn't really care, to be honest with you. But it gave way to kind of, the progress that we have today in technology. So probably in your history books, you had to learn some highlighted words and names of people that you're just like, they've been dead a very long time. So there was a guy named Eli Whitney who came up with the cotton gin, and that was one of the inventions that started to move us forward. So the cotton industry, not so many people had to be out in the fields. After the Civil War, they were able to start using, mechanical ingenuity to start to bring in their crops. But also, there was the invention of the light bulb, so obviously not so many candles in houses anymore. And then what happened was somebody figured out that they could actually translate sound into electrical impulses, and they could hear sound, so like a microphone. They kind of discovered the microphone before they started recording music. They were able to just make it come out, and that it would be kind of amplified, but they couldn't play it back. So in 1877, Thomas Edison invented the phonograph. I'll show you what that looks like. That is a picture of a phonograph. So it's a bit like a vinyl record player. Do any of y'all use vinyl, LPs, anything like that? It's very popular. It's made a resurgence, and it's really the same as back here in the 20s. They had these discs that were, plastic, but also there was a magnet in there. And they had grooves on the disc and a needle that pressed down and ran through the grooves. And when it did that, an electrical impulse went up into the machine, and it was converted into sound. And that big conical shape, that's where the amplification happened. So we have speakers these days, but that was what they used. So basically what they did was things got more advanced, and the Victor Talking Machine Company was established because there was the creation of a recording device. Alexander Graham Bell invented the gramophone, and then Emil Berliner developed the disc phonograph, so they were able to actually play back recorded music. The Victor Talking Machine Company invented a device that people could have in their homes called the Victrola. And throughout this humanities project that I've been doing in Coffeyville, I've been going into places like nursing homes, assisted living centers, senior centers, and I've been asking them, how many of y'all had a Victrola in your house? And people would raise their hand. So it wasn't so long ago, but they actually had these, they're pretty big, like that, and everybody had them. So an industry, as things do, cropped up around recording, and you've heard of record labels before. And we don't have record labels as we used to, because now we have everything online. We don't really need them. They're like glorified loan companies with very nice connections. But back then it was all about what you could sell. They had a product. Even up into when they had CDs, the record companies made a lot of money. But so the Victor Records, Columbia Records, and OK Records were the ones that came up. Columbia is still a record label that does a lot today. They've got a few locations around the world. And OK Records was one of the only record labels that was recording black musicians. But they all three recorded country music. They found out that it was very popular and lucrative. Okay, so here is another very consequential milestone that we hit. In 1865, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, and that was at the very end of the Civil War. 1870, the 15th Amendment prohibiting denial of the right to vote based on race was ratified, and then 1896, the Plessy versus Ferguson trial solidified the decision to sanction racial segregation. That meant that our black friends were able to move about the country, and they were making music themselves, so everybody was starting to kind of integrate, and the music was starting to blend, so we got some very interesting styles. The styles that we got were ones like jazz. Jazz is primarily a black genre, and white people also played with them and learned from them, and a lot of the rhythms that they used come from African drum beats. And the same with ragtime music, which is a piano type music, but if you hear people playing like this, it's based off of ragtime music. Now this lady, her name is Ma Rainey, and she was one of the first blues singers. She had a song called Crazy Blues. You can look it up on the internet. It's that was a little hard to digest, lots of words in it, and blues sound, but one of the characteristics of blues music is that it is repetitive, and you'll have two lines that will kind of have a call and response effect. So this lady is Bessie Smith, Empress of the Blues, as she was called. She was the highest paid African American musician in her time, and she's from Chattanooga. She got her start busking on the street just outside her house. And it's now called Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, where she lived. And she became very popular. She was a dancer and singer, and so she was a bit of a showgirl. And they picked her up, and she went up to New York and performed. And eventually, she had one of the biggest tours in the States. Everything was done by railroad back then, and they were able to use many, many railroad cars to haul all of her people around with her and costumers and things. So I'm going to sing a song of Bessie's. It was written by a man named W.C. Handy. He's known as the father of the blues. At least that's what he called himself. Sometimes you'll find people like that. Jimmy Martin's a bit like that too. Toots his own horn, you might say. So I'm going to sing this one a cappella. It's called St. Louis Blues, and you'll be able to find this song on the internet, and you'll see one of the first music videos ever created. It came way before MTV. So Bessie starts out in this music video, and she's all by herself, and she's washing the floor, and she's singing about her man who is treating her wrong. And it just expands from there. It goes into this big bar scene where all of these well-dressed black people were sitting in there, and they start singing their hearts out to the blues, and it's very beautiful. So I definitely recommend you look it up. All right, here we go. I hate to see the evening sun go down. I hate to see the evening sun go down, 'cause my baby, he's gone and left this town, feeling tomorrow like I feel today, feeling tomorrow like I feel today. Gonna pack up my crib and make my getaway. St. Louis woman with her diamond rings pulls my man around by her apron strings. If it weren't for powder and for store-bought hair, that man of mine, he wouldn't go nowhere, nowhere. All right, so that's the song. Thank you, thank you. All right, this one is in a little museum that is on the 3rd floor of the Chattanooga Public Library. I've just moved to Chattanooga, so I'm fascinated by it, and there's a museum for Bessie there as well. All right. Okay, so the reason I mention Emancipation and these two black blues singers is because that music started to influence country music. A lot of the people that came to Appalachia were immigrants from Europe, and some of them were from the Swiss region, some German. You'll hear a lot of yodeling out towards Texas, actually, because a lot of German settlers came there, and they influenced the kind of country western music that's out there. But as I was mentioning earlier, Nashville is not the birthplace of country music. They actually credit that to the city of Bristol, Tennessee. And they kind of won out because what happened was that Victor record label, they decided that they wanted to start recording country music. And they had one man who was a producer, and he said, I know how to record those hillbillies. Let me skip to this next slide. What is a hillbilly? Well, Appalachia tends to be a very impoverished area. Coal mining is the primary source of income, or at least it was. And so people pretty much entertained themselves and lifted their burdens by singing out on the porches of their homes. And so that was their way of entertaining themselves. And there were some bands that became kind of popular, and perhaps they play in country stores and that kind of thing, because all of the music was live back then. A lot of people did not have those Victor recording Victrolas. All right, so it was known as hillbilly music, but that was offensive to hillbillies, so they decided to change it. They called it also down home music, but eventually they just called it country music, and that's what we call it today. This is a man named Eck Robertson. He was a fiddler who was the first person recorded by Victor Talking Machine Company. And he recorded in 1922. He was from Texas. And he recorded 4 songs for them. They were duets, fiddle duets. The one way people kind of toured back then and how they made their income as musicians is with the medicine shows, and that's what Eck Robertson did. Also Jimmy Martin, if you've ever heard of him. Medicine shows, let's see, does anybody know the band Old Crow Medicine Show? Okay, that's all right. You probably know a song called Wagon Wheel, because you can't get away from it, yeah. Well, their band name actually comes from this. The medicine shows, and what they were basically like your ads that pop up on YouTube that you're really tired of, or the ads that come up on TV that you want to switch off. Well, back then they didn't have a whole lot of entertainment out in the hills, so what they would do is they would get a cart like this, and they'd bring some entertainers with them, and they'd sell products. That was the whole soul and purpose. And why it's Old Crow Medicine Show is because they were selling tonics and elixirs, basically tinctures that they were saying were cure-all medicines. And what they would do is they would have some performers, maybe acrobats or musicians, that would lure people in because they wanted the entertainment. And then they'd try to sell them these products. All right, birthplace of country music is in Bristol, Tennessee. So what happened? Let me skip a little bit ahead. Maybe I should switch those slides. But this is the man, Ralph Peer, who was the producer that came down to record the Hillbillies. And he brought a team with him of engineers and recording equipment that came by railway. And they decided that Bristol was the best location to record the Hillbillies because it's near East Tennessee and Western Virginia, right in the middle of it. And what he did was he put out the clarion call to all of the hillbillies. If you got a band, if you think you're a good musician, come in here and we'll record you. And they did it in a hat store warehouse. And they did it for about a week, and they got as many hillbillies in as they could. They found out that this music was going to be lucrative, so they wanted to cash in. All right. So it took place in 1927. That'll be a highlighted word in your book, I'm sure. Just kidding. Okay. There were some stars that rose out of these sessions. What they did was they started producing records, and people started buying them, and whichever one sold the most, you could tell who the stars were. So Jimmie Rodgers is one of them. He was known as the singing brakeman. He had a very short life. I think he was 33 when he died of tuberculosis. And what he did a couple of songs in these sessions, and they didn't go over that well. So what he did was talk to them a little further and say, I'll come up to New Jersey and I will record some more songs. So this is one of the songs he recorded subsequently. He did a couple of them that were kind of like clunkers, I guess. But he had a very smooth voice, and you'll see, I'll sing another Appalachian song a little bit later, but they had kind of a nasally sound and, just really old sounding. If you listen to those old Carter family recordings, they're very grating, and you have to kind of develop a palate for listening to them, but they're beautiful songs. Jimmie Rodgers, he had more of a refined sound, like the 1920s through the 40s had that kind of elegance to them. But here's one of the songs he sang. He still had a country voice. It's called T for Texas, and is known as the Blue Yodel #1. He had several of them called Blue Yodels. So you notice that the blues and the Swiss Mountain Yodels, they kind of got together and made this pretty interesting, unique sound. T for Texas, T for Tennessee, T for Texas, T for Tennessee, T for Belmont. That girl has made a record of me. not that easy. All right. Well, I'll sing a little bit of a Carter family tune as well. And that first one I sang was a Carter family tune, a Wildwood Flower. But here's one as well. And you'll notice it kind of has a little bit of a nasally sound to it. That was just the way of the Appalachian people. All right, this one is called You've Been a Friend. And it shows how much toil and struggle that they had up in there in the mountains and how they kind of found ways of lifting the burden. Another refined man who came up at the time, and he actually came from Bristol. And this is where I kind of make the connection between Nashville and Bristol. This is a man named Tennessee Ernie Ford, and as things progressed, they started bringing people on tours, and he was one of the touring artists at the time, and he made it really big on the Grand Ole Opry. Have you ever heard of the Grand Ole Opry? It's a worldwide thing these days. Everybody knows the Opry. But he made his home in Nashville, and one of his most, probably highest producing songs was one called 16 Tons. And it's about the coal miners and the coal miner country and the allure of the mines. All right, here's 16 Tons. I'll just sing a couple of verses of this one. Some people say that man is made out of mud. The poor man's made out of muscles and blood and skin and bones. A mind that's weak and a back that's strong. You load 16 tons, and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can go. I owe my soul to the company store. I was born one morning when the sun didn't shine. Picked up my shovels and I went to the mine. Loaded 16 tons of number 9 coal, and the straw boss said, well, bless my soul, I loaded 16 tons. And what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can go. I owe my soul to the company store. Sorry about that. All right. That is 16 tons. It sold a whole lot of records for Tennessee Ernie Ford. All right, here's Music City. That building in the background we fondly know as the Batman building. the old Bell South building, but this is called Broadway, and this is where all of the bars are of the famous country music stars, and a lot of people will busk out there. It's almost too loud anymore for that sort of thing, but they have a quadruple decker bar, I think, 4 floors, and there's bands on all of them now, and it's very loud and ruckus down there. I don't like it that much. I like Chattanooga better. But I did grow up there. So what made Nashville so famous was this show called the Grand Ole Opry. And we think of it as a building. That's the Grand Ole Opry. But it was a radio show. And so basically what happened was WSM Radio was the first station out of there that really hit. And they played like classical music and that kind of thing. But then they all of a sudden came up with a show called the Saturday Night Barn Dance. And they had a host that was very popular who had come from another show and started hosting this one. And they started bringing all of the what became known as the Opry stars, people like Hank Williams and Roy Acuff, many different bands from all over hillbilly country and Texas and the West. Well, this is the Ryman Auditorium, and that is what housed the Grand Ole Opry. And a little bit of background on this building. If you see the then, it was built in, I think, 1920 something. But what was going on in Nashville at the time was they had riverboats on the Tennessee River, and drunkenness was something they were definitely dealing with, and it was destroying families for the love of whiskey. And so what they did was they had a gospel preacher come, and he drew thousands of people each night. And they had these things called tent revivals. So they would talk on, the evils of liquor and that sort of thing. And a lot of people came to be saved, and they were changed forever. And one of those people was Tom Ryman, for which the Ryman is named. And he had a heart for the people down there in Nashville. So what he did was basically kind of like the medicine shows. He had a cart, and he went to preach the gospel to people in the area and in Nashville. And they would have music. And at the end, he would take up a collection, and that collection of money would go to build what was known as the Unity Gospel Tabernacle. And it was just a place for Christians to gather in unity and worship. And he started to bring, it was all hours of the day too, so he would bring different people who would give speeches, talks on things, lectures. And then there would be singing, and he'd bring musical acts. And then eventually, when he passed, the board decided they're going to rename it and call it the Ryman Auditorium, and it started to be used for other things. And the Grand Ole Opry was one of the things that it was used for. All right. So that's what it looked like back then. And then what happened was the Ryman Auditorium kind of fell into disrepair. If you've ever seen Walk the Line, have you seen that film? With Joaquin Phoenix portraying, Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash, by the way, Mother Maybelle is his mother-in-law, so there's that connection there. He kicks out a light in the movie, and that was at the Ryman. It was basically, the ceilings were dripping, the stage was kind of falling into disrepair, and they needed to move locations and find another place to house the Opry. So they moved it to Music Valley Drive in Donaldson, and I lived across the interstate from the Grand Ole Opry for most of my life. And the Ryman is now, it's still used for music. They were able to renovate it and make it better, and so it's now another venue, and they bring other kinds of music there, but they still do country music as well, and bluegrass. So circa 1972, some hippies rolled into town. Remember I asked you about the song Fishing in the Dark? Well, that band became very popular, and they had some roots in this country music. They grew up listening to the Opry stars, Roy Acuff and everybody, Earl Scruggs, and in fact, John McEwen, who is the friend who brought me on stage, he learned to play banjo by listening to Earl Scruggs. And people like the Darlings off of the Beverly Hillbillies, also known as the Dillards. And so what he did was he got in contact with Earl, and Earl put him in contact with the stars that they wanted to record with. That was what was on their heart to do. So they started meeting these country musicians, and they were a little bit leery of these hippie boys from California It was just post the Vietnam War, and they were like, you know, we don't want any trouble and that kind of thing. But then they found out that the heart of those musicians was for their music and that they wanted to honor them with this recording project. So they recorded an album called Will the Circle Be Unbroken? I don't know if y'all know that song, but you'll know it in a few minutes because I'm going to sing it. Here's what the Dirt Band looked like. Mother Maybelle called them the Dirty Boys. They just had long beards, and we don't really think about that today, but apparently it was very jarring for them. Okay. So here are a few of the stars that they recorded. I should have put a picture of Roy Acuff in there, but Merle Travis, who was another one of those coal miner singers. Jimmy Martin, who is a bluegrass musician from Kentucky, which is where bluegrass music originated, sort of. I hear Atlanta as well, but Earl Scruggs and Maybelle Carter. Now this is the Country Music Hall of Fame, and that's where we honor the stars of the past and some of the present day ones as well. You can go there anytime, you know, I highly recommend it. It's a big, beautiful building on the inside. And there is the picture on the front of this, the Gateway to Country Music picture, is inside this room. You can see it in the back there. It's beautiful, and it represents country music. There's also a folk music one, but it exists elsewhere. And that circle in the middle, there's one of those on the Opry stage at the Grand Ole Opry. It's a big deal to musicians who get to play there for the first time to be able to stand in that circle. And at this point in this beautiful auditorium, if you go in there, and you can, so when you go and visit, you go and stand in that circle, and even if you can't carry a tune, you will sing like an angel. I guarantee it. All right. So there's John McEwen and his circle band, and I got to play with them in Marion, Virginia, up in that Appalachian region. I'm going to sing now for my final song, Will the Circle Be Unbroken? If you know this one, I hope you'll sing it with me.
Lord,
everybody. Thank you very much for coming. I hope you learned something. There is the painting that is in the Country Music Hall of Fame. It's very famous, and as you can see, there's a lot of folk instruments in there too. So anyway, thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.